2020 was a strange year. With the pandemic tearing the world apart and my retail job vanishing overnight, I had to reinvent myself. I became an Uber driver to pay the bills. The nights were long, the passengers varied. Drunk people, lost souls, folks who just needed a friendly ear, or complete silence. That Friday night in October, it was almost 1 a.m. I had just dropped off a couple at a hotel on the outskirts of town and was ready to call it a night. But then the app pinged. New ride request 4 minutes away. Pickup location, an old bowling alley in a worn-out strip mall. It was drizzling and foggy. When I arrived, the parking lot was empty except for one man standing alone under a flickering streetlight. He wore a grey hoodie, jeans, and had his hands in his pockets, head down. He looked like he was staring at his shoes. "You, Derek?" I asked through the half-open window. He nodded slowly and got into the back seat without a word. No greeting, no rush, no small talk. The ride was set to a residential neighborhood about 20 minutes away. I tapped "Start Trip" and drove off. For the first several minutes, total silence. But what really unnerved me was how he kept staring straight ahead. Not at his phone, not out the window, just at the back of my head. Trying to break the tension, I asked. "Rough night," he replied in a dry whisper. "Just needed to get out of there." Out of where? Doesn't matter. His voice wasn't drunk or high. It was flat, hollow, like something had been emptied out of him. We were about 5 minutes from the destination when he suddenly leaned forward and said, "Actually, pull into that driveway right there." I looked. The house was abandoned looking. No lights, tall grass, peeling paint. "Is this your place?" I asked. "Just pull in," he said coldly. I hesitated, then pulled into the driveway. I stopped near the porch. He didn't get out. I looked at him through the mirror. "Everything okay?" He kept staring at the front door and muttered, "Wait here." Then he stepped out and disappeared around the side of the house. I sat there for maybe 2 minutes, frozen. Technically, the ride was still active, but my gut was screaming at me to get out. Something was wrong. So I manually ended the ride and put the car in reverse. That's when I saw him. He was walking back toward the car fast, his expression tight, almost angry, almost thrilled. His hands were empty. I didn't want to make a scene, so I unlocked the doors, but every cell in my body screamed, "Don't let him back in." He opened the rear door and said, without sitting, "Take me to the other place." "What other place?" "Just drive, I'll tell you." "You need to enter it in the app," I said, keeping my eyes forward. He didn't move, just stared at me through the mirror. After a few seconds, he muttered, "Take me back to where you picked me up." I didn't argue, I just drove. The air in the car felt heavy. He didn't say a word the entire ride back, but I could feel his gaze again, unblinking. I tried to ease the tension again. "Rough night, huh?" he responded. "You could say that. Everything all right?" "Not yet." We arrived at the bowling alley. I parked under the same light. Before I could say anything, he leaned forward and whispered, "You ever wonder how you're going to die?" My hands froze on the steering wheel. "Not really something I think about," I said with a nervous laugh. He didn't laugh. "I think about it all the time," he said coldly. Then he opened the door, didn't get out right away. Just stood half in, half out of the car. Then he looked at me and said, You picked the wrong guy up tonight." He shut the door and disappeared into the dark. I sat there, shaken. I couldn't move. When I finally pulled away, I kept checking my mirrors the entire drive home. I had never felt fear like that before. At home, I opened the Uber app to review the trip. That's when I realized there was no trip, no Derek, no ride history, no payment. It was as if nothing had happened. I contacted Uber support. They told me sometimes trips vanish if there's a crash in the app or if the passenger cancels mid-ride. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I lived. I knew what he said. "You picked the wrong guy up tonight." I never saw him again. And I hope I never do. But every time I get a ping from a dimly lit parking lot or a silent rider in the back seat, I remember. I remember that night, and I wonder, did he change his mind at the last second? Or was scaring me all he wanted from the beginning? Or worse, was he still looking for the right car? It was a January night in rural Mississippi. Cold, a light drizzle, and a fog that made everything look like an old horror film. My best friend Lexi and I had spent the afternoon in a nearby town, visiting her grandmother at the hospital. When we left, it was already close to 9 p.m. We were exhausted, cold, and starving. We decided to call an Uber back to our Airbnb, which was about 40 minutes away. The route was isolated, mostly trees, narrow roads, and pitch-black stretches without any street lights. There was no public transport, and walking was out of the question in that weather. The request was accepted almost immediately. A black sedan, no visible license plate in the app. Driver's name, just Jay. No profile picture. The rating was decent, but something about the profile felt off. A strange instinct crept in, like a chill under the skin that wasn't from the rain. When the car arrived, it didn't pull up to the curb. It stopped several meters away, in a fog-covered corner. The windows were foggy from the inside, and the driver didn't roll down the window or wave. He just flicked the high beams at us for 2 seconds, a signal to get in. Lexi hesitated. "There's no photo, and he didn't even say anything." "I know, but there's no one else around, and if we cancel, we'll be stuck here." The front passenger door was locked, so we climbed into the back. The car smelled strange, not rotten, but not clean either. And the driver, wearing a heavy dark hoodie, never turned to face us, not even once. His hood covered everything. "Hi, are you Jay?" I asked. Silence. The car started moving, slowly. The road was soaked, and the sound of tires slicing through puddles was the only thing we could hear inside that sealed, humid sedan. Lexi grabbed my hand tightly. I knew she was feeling it too. Something wasn't right. It was like we were locked inside a slow-moving nightmare. The kind where you try to run, but your legs won't move. "You're following the address from the app, right?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. The man made a noise, a grunt, then a slight nod, but still no words. And what creeped me out the most? The rearview mirror was tilted upward, aimed at the ceiling. We couldn't see his face, not even a sliver of it. Halfway through the trip, he suddenly turned off the main road and onto a dirt path. The GPS route changed. "Hey, GPS says to stay on the main road," Lexi said, louder now. No response. The rain grew heavier. The trees around us were thicker, almost closing in. At one point, the car slid slightly round a muddy curve. He didn't react, just calmly corrected and kept driving like nothing had happened. He drove like someone on autopilot, someone with no soul behind the wheel. Then I saw it. In the open glove box up front, something caught my eye. An old worn ID badge. I leaned forward. It read, David Lawson, Grenada County, missing since 2017. My stomach turned. I showed Lexi. Her eyes widened. We were inside the car of someone carrying the ID of a man who had been missing for 5 years. Sir, please, we want to get out here, I said, trying to keep calm. He didn't answer. Lexi pulled out her phone to call for help, but no signal. He disabled the car's Wi-Fi, she whispered in panic. It was already too late. The car stopped, in the middle of nowhere. No houses, no lights, just forest and fog. The man turned off the engine but left the headlights on. Rain pounded the hood like a war drum. We sat there, frozen, hearts pounding. He didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, face hidden by shadows, unmoving. I did the only thing I could. I flung the door open and pulled Lexi with me. We ran, slipping through mud, dodging branches, hoping not to fall, just running, until we saw lights. A broken metal sign, barely hanging. Old Pine Service Station, closed since 2002. We climbed through a shattered window and hid behind the counter. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. Then we heard it, a car engine starting up, speeding off into the darkness. We waited 20 more minutes before crawling back out. Barely enough signal to call the police, they came. But when we returned to the place where the car had stopped, nothing. No gate, no road, no tyre marks, no car, and in the Uber app, no record of the ride, no driver Jay. Not even the screenshot Lexi had taken remained in her gallery. But that badge, the one that read David Lawson, I kept it. I looked him up. Missing since 2017. Last seen getting into his car during a rainy night. Exactly like ours. So now I wonder, were we riding in his car, or was it David himself driving? It was February 2022. My name is Jonathan, and I've been driving for Uber for about 3 years. I've seen it all. Fights in the back seat, people passed out, strange requests. But nothing compares to the night I thought I wasn't going to make it home. It was a Friday around 11 p.m. I'd just dropped off a couple at a restaurant and was thinking of ending my shift. That's when the app pinged. New passenger, 4 minutes away, name, Daniel, pickup location, a bus stop near a city park. It was lightly raining and the fog was creeping over the road. When I arrived, I saw a man standing under the shelter, wearing a soaked overcoat and a hat. His face was hidden in the shadows. I could only make out a scruffy chin and a pale, dry mouth. "Daniel?" I asked through the window, trying to sound friendly. He simply nodded and got in the car without a word. I started the trip. The destination. 88 Cobbleman Street. I'd never heard of it before. As we drove, the rain picked up. He remained silent, staring out the window with stiff posture, like he was on high alert. Every now and then he muttered things under his breath. Incoherent at first, but one sentence stood out. "No one escapes from number 88. I tried to laugh it off, thinking he was just being weird, but his voice wasn't joking. It was flat, harsh, like a warning. I looked in the rearview mirror. He was staring straight at me, not blinking. That's when the dread began. We took a turn onto a less familiar road. Streetlights became scarce, and the city slowly faded behind us. The route became more rural, isolated, quiet. The GPS said we were 8 minutes away, but nothing around us looked familiar. No houses, no traffic, just wet pavement and towering trees. "Have you been here before?" I asked, trying to keep it casual. He answered in a voice that chilled my blood. "No one comes here, not unless they owe something." "Oh, what?" "You do," he said calmly. "You owe." My grip on the steering wheel tightened. My foot wavered on the gas pedal. "Look, if this is a joke..." "It's not," he snapped, louder this time. I focused back on the road, but then the GPS began glitching. The route disappeared. The screen went white. All it showed was a name, Koppelman, 88. No directions, no time, no map. "That doesn't make sense," I whispered. "It does," he said. "You just don't know you've already arrived." Then he yelled, "Turn right, now." Startled, I turned sharply onto a muddy driveway. The car skidded slightly, tires fighting the terrain, and stopped in front of a rusted iron gate. Chains hung loose. The number 88 was painted in dripping red, like blood. But there was no house, just a dirt road curling into the forest, and the gate creaked open on its own. I was ready to turn around, but when I looked at the mirror, the back seat was empty. Empty. I slammed on the brakes and jumped out. The rear door was still closed. Rain soaked me instantly. I opened it anyway. No one. "Daniel?" I called out. Silence. I looked around the woods. Nothing but dark trees and the sound of rain on leaves. I ran back to the car, heart racing, tried to start the engine. Nothing. Completely dead. Then the radio turned on by itself, even though it was off. A voice crackled through the static. "You took the passenger. Now you pay for the road." I panicked. Grabbed my phone. No signal. The cabin lights flickered. Then the voice came again, this time from the speakers. "No one escapes number 88. I jumped out and started running. I didn't look back. Mud splashed up my legs. Branches scraped my arms. But I didn't care. I just ran. Eventually I saw lights. A broken metal sign. Old Pine Service Station. Closed. Since 2002, I broke in through a side window and hid behind a dusty counter. I waited. Maybe 30 minutes. Then I heard an engine start in the distance and fade away. When I finally had signal, I called the police. They took me back to the location, but there was nothing there. No road, no gate, no 88. And the Uber trip vanished. No Daniel, no ride history, no payment, just gone. But in the back pocket of the driver's seat, I found something that wasn't mine. An old ID badge, faded, wet. The name read, Daniel Koppelman died in 1988, disappeared while driving a taxi on a rainy Friday night. So now I ask myself, did I give him a ride? Or was it him driving again?